Big tech's offensive against conservatives continues. I'll explain why this didn't start with last week's riot at the Capitol. Also, ahead, House Democrats move forward on impeachment. We'll talk to Congressman Andy Biggs about those efforts. Friends, it's time for Hold the Line. Welcome to Hold the Line. I'm Buck Sexton. Big tech is going with its suppression of conservatives on their platforms like we've never seen quite before. Facebook has announced that it will remove all content that mentions the phrase, "Stop the steal." Not allowed to say it anymore. I don't even know if you're allowed to make fun of it. You can't say it. In a statement posted on the company's official blog, Facebook management wrote, quote, "We're taking additional steps and using the same teams and technologies we used during the general election to stop misinformation and content that could further incite violence during these next few weeks. We're now removing content containing the phrase "Stop the Steal" under our coordinating harm policy from Facebook and Instagram." Wow. Meanwhile, the embattled Parler app is fighting against tech giants Apple, Amazon, and Google since they've colluded over the weekend to deplatform the fledgling social network. Parler is asking a federal court for injunctive relief against Amazon after the company kicked it from their servers. In a lawsuit filed in federal court in Seattle, attorneys for Parler claim, quote, "Amazon's decision to terminate effectively Parler's account is apparently motivated by political animus." Yeah, no surprise. It's also apparently designed to reduce competition in the microblogging services market to the benefit of Twitter. Doing so is the equivalent of pulling the plug on a hospital patient on life support. It will kill Parler's business at the very time it is set to skyrocket. Friends, we are in for quite a fight here. But I want to remind everybody of something right now. What we've seen is more overt political discrimination from these companies than ever before. They're telling us now, if you say things we don't like about Joe Biden's election, if you say things that we decide could theoretically lead to violence, not calling for violence itself, but is in some way associated with what others have done in terms of political violence, we will shut you down, we will take you off, we will make sure that your business fails and you will not have a voice. But this began, if you recall, much earlier even than what we saw with this election. Going into 2020, we thought that we were going to be facing a very different year, and then the COVID-19 pandemic hit. There were a lot of experts who came forward with things that we now recognize as clearly wrong. Dr. Fauci saying the public shouldn't wear masks in public. The public shouldn't wear masks. This was back in March of 2020, and that might make people feel better, but there wouldn't be anything really to it in terms of saving lives. Now, if you even point to that, you're somehow a conspiracy theorist, just to say, well, that was what was told then. But what you saw were the social media companies taking a position that there were only certain allowable comments and commentary allowed with lockdowns, with mask wearing, with a whole range and series of issues relating to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we saw what their intent was. And keep in mind that the expert consensus, which is the only thing they can rely on to make these kinds of determinations for fact-checking, the expert consensus wasn't enough to prevent the closure of schools in places like New York City, for which the evidence now unequivocally shows there should never have been closures. But sure enough, if you took the wrong position, you could be deplatformed. You could actually be told that you would lose your access. That was on COVID. And then we saw the suppression of the entirely accurate news reporting from the New York Post that Hunter Biden was involved in some shady dealings that did not reflect well on the Biden family's penchant for making money using foreign connections and selling access to Joe Biden. So the censorship has been rolling on for some time. The effort to suppress opinions that the left does not like has been going on for quite some time. What does this mean now? Now, I understand there are a lot of people that are thinking it will stop. This must stop after Joe Biden becomes the president, right? Then things will calm down. There'll be a cooling off. It's just right now it's so tense, and it is, by the way. And what happened at the Capitol was horrible, and political violence is disgraceful. But we're being led to believe that what's going on right now is likely to, if not stop, at least be on the decline with this censorship from these social media companies. Do you really believe that? Do you think that these tech companies are going to, after wielding all this power openly, when they have an administration coming in that is as cozy as can be with the big tech companies and that shares their political beliefs, you think that all of a sudden they're going to give all this power back? They're going to allow people to speak freely on their platforms? No, this is being used right now in a similar way to 15 days to slow the spread. It seems like it's at its most reasonable point. Right now, things are hot, things are tense. Bad stuff has happened in D.C., no question about it. They just say they want to stop an incitement to violence. And then after Joe Biden takes the presidency, we're at least led to believe that you'll be able to share ideas freely over the internet again. I don't think you will. I think this is the beginning of an entirely new authoritarian regime for policing speech. I think that you're going to see a union, an alliance of big tech and big government through the Democrat Party that is seeking to dominate and deplatform and destroy based upon political preference. And so unless we do everything we can right now to raise up whatever voices we have and say, this is bad for America, it is un-American to prevent your political opponents and critics from being able to share their ideas in the contemporary public square, which is the internet, unless we can start to get more momentum behind that idea, this is likely only to get worse. 15 days to slow the spread. Seemed reasonable at the time. They made powerful arguments for it. And now we're at almost, what, a year of continuous lockdowns and suppression. And do you think that that same logic may apply here to speech policing? Oh, it's just to make sure we get rid of violent content and possible insurrection language before the Joe Biden inauguration, for which there's a lot of security and a lot of concern, understandably. Well, do you really believe that once Biden becomes the president, all of a sudden conservatives are going to be given the ability to speak freely about not only the election, but lockdowns and COVID and vaccinations? You see that Los Angeles public schools are looking to make children, who are at almost no risk from the disease, by the way, take the vaccine as a condition of going back. Are we going to be able to have that debate? Are we going to be able to say, hold on a second, why should kids who clear this virus very quickly and rarely, if ever, are major nodes of transmission, why should they be forced to get this? I don't know if you'll be able to say that on Twitter or Facebook, and I would have thought you could say it on Parler, but they're trying to destroy it. This is what we are up against right now, my friends. We need to understand this goes to some of the most precious freedoms in our society. And the fight is on to preserve them for all of us. This isn't actually a partisan issue. This is an American issue. We'll have to see how this shapes up. Every morning, I kick it off the same way with Black Rifle coffee. In fact, I drink it several times a day. If you're like me, you need coffee, but you don't want to be supporting some company of the woke left, and you also don't want to have to wait in line and want delicious coffee at a great price. Well, I can cover all of that for you with Black Rifle coffee. The best way to enjoy Black Rifle is through the Coffee Club. That's a free subscription where your chosen coffee is roasted, packaged, and shipped free to your door on your schedule. In addition to the convenience, you receive discounted pricing and gain access to exclusive products, member-only content, partner discounts, and more. Get the freshest coffee in America without leaving your couch. Purchase at blackriflecoffee.com/buck. Make sure you use promo code BUCK at checkout for 20% off your first purchase and your first Coffee Club order. Again, that's blackriflecoffee.com/buck. Get great coffee from American patriots who share your values. Go check it out today, blackriflecoffee.com/buck. We've been hearing a lot about how if we don't listen to science, we're going to suffer a terrible second wave. That's what we've been told by a lot of politicians and the media across the country. Well, here we are in the midst of a second wave, and people are starting to realize what we've been told so far needs to be at least adjusted when it comes not only to lockdowns, but also vaccines, the rollout, how quickly is this going? Let's start with what is being said right now by Governor Phil Murphy of New Jersey. And we could do this in many different states, many different places. But Governor Phil Murphy has taken the position that the reason things have gotten so bad is, oh, you guessed it, because we did not listen to people like Governor Murphy. Play it.
We had anticipated, as I said, an increase in positive tests coming out of the holidays, and it is safe to say that we are now experiencing that increase. This is likely from indoor gatherings where neither social distancing nor wearing a face mask were adhered to. And this is what we were afraid of, people letting their guard down over Christmas and New Year's and spreading the virus among their families and friends. And for the next upcoming days, we're probably going to see the impact of this.
Letting your guard down, you see. That's why this is happening. It's your fault, Governor Murphy wants you to know. Who's you? Whoever's listening. That's right, COVID is somehow the result of a lack of adherence to policies, not the inherent weaknesses of imperfect policies, which we know are always going to be the case. Governor Murphy going in exactly, I think, the wrong. But what else is he going to say? Yeah, you know what? I was wrong and we can't actually stop this thing. So why are we doing all these mitigation measures when it comes to lockdowns, when really individual mitigation measures on a person-to-person basis are the single most effective way that we could hope to slow this thing down, not massive sweeping government action? Governor Cuomo seems to be figuring this out, or at least at the beginning stage of understanding this. Here's what he says about how, you know, it turns out we may actually have to open before the entire pandemic passes because we're losing too much of the economy. Play it.
We must plan our economic resurgence. We simply cannot stay closed until the vaccine hits critical mass. The cost is too high. We will have nothing left to open. We must reopen the economy, but we must do it smartly and safely.
Now, it's that last point, of course, that's going to be the problem, because he's just bowing to reality on this one. Even with all the propaganda instincts that Governor Cuomo has, he can't explain why is it that there were pieces, and you can find them for yourself, that said if we get to 80% mask compliance in this country, we will have a dramatic drop-off in COVID cases. Well, no, we've seen an explosion in COVID cases, and every poll that you will see shows 80% and above mask compliance among the American people based upon the laws of their state. So what happened there? Now you're even seeing maybe we need, this is real, this is in the New York Times, 2 masks. 1 is not enough. I predicted this on Twitter months ago. 2 masks better than 1, they're saying. Maybe that's the problem here. You need to have an N95 or rather, you need to have a surgical mask and then another mask on top of it. Or perhaps an N95 with a surgical mask on top of that. Now, N95 masks, because we do believe in science here, are more effective based upon even theoretical experimentation with the virus, more effective in filtering it out. So why aren't we all wearing N95 masks? Why isn't that the standard? Oh, that's right. Because they were worried we were going to run out, so they lied to us in the beginning of this pandemic and said, don't worry about the N95s, so don't wear those. What? They're going to go back on that one too. Just give it time. What happens if we just roll with this? If we just say the people in charge will let them continue to determine this and to make policy for all of us? What happens then? Well, the World Health Organization chief said yesterday that herd immunity is unlikely this whole year, even with vaccines. Play it.
It's really important to remind people, both governments as well as individuals, on the responsibilities and the measures that we continue to need to practice for the next, well, for the rest of this year at least, because even as vaccines start protecting the most vulnerable, we're not going to achieve any levels of population immunity or herd immunity in 2021.
No herd immunity in 2021. Show me the math on this one. I'd really like to see that. Given the level of infection we have and the level of vaccination, we're not going to be approaching herd immunity. But remember, the control and the power that they have over you, until there is universal agreement that the vaccine is entirely eradicated based on the rules that they have set up now, based on their expectations, you have to obey. Or we could take a more reasonable approach. Even Governor Cuomo is saying, we can't keep doing this. We cannot continue. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is shaking up the American foreign policy establishment in the closing days of the Trump administration. Take a look at what he's up to in tonight's Buck Brief. Have you ever wanted to invest in real estate, but you didn't have the time to do it all on your own? Well, that's where I was. I felt exactly that way until about a year ago. You see, I've always loved the idea of real estate investing, but I didn't know how to do it. And especially given all the commitments I have with my profession, I mean, I'm doing hours and hours of original programming and content every day. I'm all focused on this. How could I possibly take the time to invest in real estate on my own and know what I'm doing? Well, then I met my friends at Done For You Real Estate. They took all the guesswork out of it for me. They found me an awesome property, rented it out right away. They managed the tenant for me, and now I get a check like clockwork every month, okay? I'm a client. I went with these guys. You should too. Don't wait another second to see if my buddies at Done For You Real Estate can do for you what they did for me. Visit doneforyoubuck.com to see how it works. Again, that's doneforyoubuck.com. You can start your real estate investment journey today with professionals you can trust. doneforyoubuck.com. The fast approaching end of the Trump administration does not seem to have had much of an impact on some massive foreign policy decisions issued by the State Department over the last few days. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has issued a slew of new decisions that are drastically cementing a shift in U.S. foreign policy that could affect years to come, regardless of what Biden may or may not do. Many of these actions have been heralded by the right for years as much-needed reforms. It also seems that Biden's foreign policy is going to be diametrically opposed to many of these recent changes, and he may try to shift them back. In fact, it seems like much of Biden's short-term agenda is on reversing many of the Trump administration's foreign policy decisions, including some of his foreign policy successes. Let's examine all of these complexities on today's Buck Brief. As mentioned, the impending transition of power to the Biden administration has not stopped a recent wave of policy prescriptions coming from the State Department and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Seems almost like we're getting a full term of Trump crammed into the last 2 weeks in terms of what Pompeo's been up to. Many would argue, why weren't these done sooner? Well, that's a discussion we could have another time, but let's start with a big shift in direction, lifting all self-imposed restrictions on the United States' bilateral relations with Taiwan, for example. A massive change in direction since Nixon normalized relations with the mainland People's Republic of China, now our number one geopolitical threat. So that's the big one. I mean, to make a shift here toward the end of the very end of the Trump administration on Taiwan, China is by far our biggest foreign policy challenge and our really only geopolitical rival. And the issue of Taiwan is hypersensitive. It is a red line for the Chinese in many ways. But Secretary of State Pompeo is saying we're going to go forward and normalize, further normalize some of these relations and get rid of some of these restrictions. Now, the Biden administration, the team coming in here, could try to roll some of this back right away. But once you've established more openings, it can be hard sometimes to put the toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak. And on China-Taiwan relations, there's going to be a little bit of caution, I think, from the incoming Biden team to start with. They don't want to rock the boat too much because they're going to have their hands full, that's for sure. We're also likely to see a return to a more complacent and, some would argue, more complicit Biden administration on trade and other areas where the Trump administration was combative with China. When it comes to Cuba, you haven't heard a lot about Cuba in the foreign policy realm recently, but the New York Times reports here that in announcing this move, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo cited Cuba's hosting of American fugitives and Colombian rebels and its support for Venezuela's authoritarian leader. So Cuba back on the terrorism sponsor list. And this is something that, again, they can try to roll this back, and they may have some success in it, but there's also going to be a little bit of let's allow this to play out before they start taking on that challenge right away. That's possible. You don't know. It's certainly a situation that will make things a little bit different for the incoming Biden team than they had anticipated. As we know, President Obama had a big move in his second term to make relations with Cuba much friendlier, despite no concessions whatsoever from the Cuban regime to show good faith on their side. We just were giving them benefits at the end of the Obama administration that they had not in any way earned through policy changes. And then you have, of course, Iran. If you're looking for a foreign policy challenge that's not quite at the level of China, but right behind it, here you go. Pompeo says Al-Qaeda's new home base is Iran, and they say with no evidence. Now, I would cite that the Secretary of State is pointing to, he says it's the new home base, and he confirmed, according to the Washington Free Beacon, for the first time, the killing of Al-Qaeda's number 2 in Iran, and has vowed to crush the Iran-Al-Qaeda axis. Now, one of the good things about the Trump administration foreign policy was the lack of unnecessary war starting or escalations. Putting Iran on this level as perhaps the greatest state sponsor of terror in the world, not only for the groups that we had known have been operating there, but also linking it directly to Al-Qaeda, will raise a lot of questions for a lot of people. And then you have Yemen. Secretary of State Pompeo has said the United States will designate Yemen's Iran-backed Houthi rebels as a foreign terrorist organization, which aid group said could hamstring efforts to deal with one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. So the Houthi rebels will be added to the terrorist group. And this is a designation that tends to stick. The new administration can try to take them off, but that will be something that is scrutinized and perhaps criticized from inside the ranks. Although I will tell you, you can expect that a vast majority of people who work in the State Department, because I know something about this from my time working for the government, will be very favorable to the incoming Biden administration. Most of your foreign service officers, most of your civil servants across the State Department bureaucracy, they are popping the champagne corks with a Biden administration coming in. That's just the nature of it. It's an overwhelmingly left of center organization ideologically. Yes, I'm talking about the United States State Department or Department of State. So that's something that to be aware of. And the Secretary of State also weighed on something else, wokeism. He told the New York, or he's quoted the New York Post as saying that he's chastising Voice of America for its wokeness and accusing the taxpayer funded broadcaster of engaging in censorship similar to big tech's. He called for an agency to tout American exceptionalism and democracy. So essentially, if we're going to have taxpayer dollars running a media organization, shouldn't that media organization like America? That's the idea. Oh, here we actually have him saying it. Play it.
They didn't want the voice of American diplomacy to be broadcast on the Voice of America. Think about that for just a moment. Look, we're all part of institutions with duties and responsibilities higher and bigger and more important than any one of us individually. But this kind of censorial instinct is dangerous. It's morally wrong. Indeed, it's against your statutory mandate here at VOA. Censorship, wokeness, political correctness, it all points in one direction: authoritarianism cloaked as moral righteousness. Similar to what we're seeing at Twitter and Facebook and Apple and on too many university campuses today. It's not who we are. It's not who we are as Americans. And it's not what Voice of America should be. It's time that we simply put wokeism to sleep.
Well said by the Secretary of State. I think he has his eyes on a political future, friends, beyond what we've even seen to this point. Coming up next, the House is set to vote tomorrow on a second impeachment of President Donald Trump. Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona joins us to discuss that when we return. I got a crash course into home title theft, and you better pray this crime never happens to you because it can ruin you financially. Here's how the crime happens. The legal titles to our homes are kept online where they can be hacked. A cyber thief finds your home's title, forges your signature on a quitclaim deed stating you sold your home to him. Then he takes out loans against your home until your equity is gone. You won't know until the collection calls pour in, and you're not protected by insurance, your bank, or common identity theft programs. Home Title Lock protects you. And in the unlikely event you become a victim of title theft while a member, Home Title Lock will spend up to $250,000 in legal fees to help restore your home's title. All you have to do is go to HomeTitleLock.com and register your address to see if you're already a victim. Then use code RADIO for 30 free days of protection. That's code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com. Again, code RADIO at HomeTitleLock.com. That's HomeTitleLock BLITZ.com.
Sadly, the person who's running the executive branch is a deranged, unhinged, dangerous president of the United States. And only a number of days until we can be protected from him.
It is possible that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi could get her wish still with just 8 days left in his term. The House is moving forward on an impeachment vote tomorrow of President Trump, accusing him of incitement of insurrection. House Democrats releasing a statement after introducing the single article of impeachment saying, quote, "Everyone involved in the assault on the Capitol must be held accountable, beginning with the man most responsible for it, President Donald Trump. We cannot begin to heal the soul of this country without first delivering swift justice to all its enemies, foreign and domestic." Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, is going to join us now. Congressman, first just tell us, what should we be expecting here? How is this process going to work now the Democrats have introduced this article of impeachment?
Well, the first thing they're going to do is have debate tonight on the 25th Amendment resolution, and then we'll vote sometime late tonight, about 10:30, something like that. And then tomorrow, they've told us that we're going to have debate. They haven't told us how long that debate's going to be. It won't be in committee, which is the normal way that you would do this. It's not through a resolution voted on and then sent to a committee and then back. It's going to be a snap, quick process because they want to do it all in one day. So tomorrow we'll probably debate, probably have a vote on it tomorrow evening sometime.
And explain to everybody, is it even a feasible timeline? Just put aside whether they have the votes or not. Would they even be able to procedurally go forward with an impeachment and a removal of the president in 8 days?
No, because even if Nancy Pelosi were to transmit this bill as soon as she possibly could, you would need some kind of special vote of the Senate to accelerate the timeline. Otherwise, this is going to roll out. If I'm not mistaken, I thought that the Majority Leader McConnell said about 1 p.m. on the 20th, which ironically is about an hour after President-elect Biden will have been sworn in.
And Congressman, I have to ask, what are your feelings on Pelosi's effort here, the one that she's leading to have the president removed at this late stage?
Well, I have to tell you, I think it's because she is so filled with hate and rage towards Donald Trump. I mean, this is going to be the first president who they've tried to impeach before he was sworn in, and then for the entire 4 years he was in, and then when he's done. And the reality is, Buck, our country is sizzling right now. It is combustible, and this type of activity actually throws gas on the fire. So instead of cooling this thing down and trying to bring this back down to a more manageable level where people can have debate and rhetoric, they're trying to throw gas on this fire. And you still have tens of millions of people who look askance at the election and don't really believe in the legitimacy of the incoming administration.
Congressman Jim Jordan raised this. I wanted to have you react to it. Play the clip.
Turning to the 25th Amendment into a political weapon by demanding that the Vice President invoke it to remove the President from office, I think is just wrong. Let's be clear. Democrats have been wanting to remove President Trump from office since he won the election in 2016. They failed with the Russia investigation, they failed with the Mueller investigation, and they failed with their first impeachment investigation. So here we are again, considering another divisive effort to go after President Trump.
It does seem that from a pure constitutionality perspective, the president is not incapacitated as much as the Democrats may be even more outraged at him than they have been for the past 4 years. What do you make of this move to try to use the 25th Amendment, to leverage the 25th Amendment to take the president out of office?
Well, it's wrong on a couple of levels. First of all, constitutionally, as you mentioned, he is not incompetent or incapable of carrying out his duties. He's perfectly capable. That's why he's flying down to the border today and visiting with the border and meeting with many people. The second thing is, if Congress wants to enact the 25th Amendment, there is a process actually in Section 4 of the 25th Amendment that says, look, what you get to do is you get to create a commission, and you use your commission, and then you go through it and decide that you think that he's incapable. But they're not doing that. In fact, they actually have a bill that the same guy introduced on October 9th that did that commission, but that was silly and wasteful. And so now they just say, oh, Mr. Vice President, you do it. So this is really constitutionally infirm and ludicrous, quite frankly.
And Senator Chuck Schumer has been talking about putting people at the Capitol on a no-fly list. There seems to be a move toward an enlarging of the counter-terror state to go after specifically not just domestic terrorists, but what are being talked about in Democrat circles as pro-Trump domestic terrorists. Here's what Chuck Schumer said.
Any of those who are inside the Capitol should not be able to fly and should be placed on the no-fly list. We are calling on the authorities, FBI, TSA, Department of Homeland Security, to put them on the no-fly list immediately. We cannot allow these same insurrectionists to get on a plane and cause more violence and more damage.
Very clearly, Chuck Schumer suggesting that anybody who enter the Capitol is essentially the moral equivalent of an al-Qaeda terrorist who would seize control of a plane and use it as a weapon or bring it down. And going even further than that, Homeland Security Committee Chair Benny Thompson of Mississippi has said that he wants Senators Ted Cruz and Hawley, sitting U.S. senators who had nothing to do with the assault on the Capitol personally. They did not assault any Capitol building, on the no-fly list. Congressman, what is going on here?
Well, first of all, these people that actually broke into the Capitol, attacked the Capitol police officers, they have done the Trump legacy and Trump movement perhaps irreparable harm.
Yep.
It's really tragic. And they do deserve to be apprehended and prosecuted. But this notion that we're going to start saying that, let's say, Senator Cruz and Senator Hawley, because they exercised their constitutional and statutory authority to join in raising objections about the election, by the way, as the Democrats did in every one of the elections this century that a Republican has won, is just basically part and parcel to this entire cancel culture which we're seeing right now, which, Buck, you know it, it's the tech censor that's going on, in the tech media censorship that's going on, also with regard to the donors to Republicans, where they're saying we're not going to give you any more money. I mean, this is just more of the cancel culture. I believe that they're trying to get to a single party system and basically to destroy the Republican Party.
Congressman, before I let you go, I just want to know, what's the feeling like down there right now? What's the atmosphere on Capitol Hill in D.C. as a member of Congress?
It was very tense for a lot of reasons, and a lot of people are feeling a little bit insecure. They felt like they feel vulnerable here. They feel tense. It's not just on our side of the aisle, on both sides of the aisle, but certainly if you're a Republican and you realize that the Democrats are trying to use every means possible to centralize the power to themselves and then try to destroy the Republican Party and many within the party. It is disturbing, but I would say tense is the best word I can give you.
Congressman Biggs from Arizona, good to see you, sir. Stay safe, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Buck.
When we come back, we'll take a look at some of the stories we didn't quite get to, but want to get through in our quick hits. These days, being prepared for our unknown future is more important than ever. I'm sure you've seen the world we live in is anything but predictable, and we could all benefit from something reliable right about now. What could be more reliable than real gold and silver? I'm talking about actual gold and silver that you can hold in your hands. Call the Oxford Gold Group now. Learn how easy it is to get real gold and silver sent securely directly to your home, or how you can have real gold and silver placed in your IRA or 401k. Just call the Oxford Gold Group at 833-600-GOLD and ask for your free guide on owning gold and silver. Again, call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group is the only gold company I trust. Call them right now, 833-600-GOLD. Don't wait for inflation to kick in. Don't wait for the dollars in your bank account to lose value. Take action today. Diversify your portfolio. with real gold and silver. The Oxford Gold Group, 833-600-GOLD. The richest man in the world has some thoughts on tech censorship. A congresswoman blames her fellow Republicans for giving her COVID-19. Ilhan Omar calls Trump a murderer, and Project Veritas strikes again. Time for some quick hits. Let's get right to it. First off, you will recall, before we get to what Elon Musk had to say, who is now, because of Tesla, the richest man in the world, even richer than Jeff Bezos, as amazing as that may be. But you remember that there was a time when Twitter stood for openness, stood for a free exchange of ideas. That's when I was setting up my account years ago, and so many others. That's what we thought we were getting, because that's what we were told. Here is Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, back in, I think it's 2015, saying exactly that. Twitter stands for freedom of expression. We stand for speaking truth to power, and we stand for empowering dialogue. That is obviously not true. So let's at least all come to that recognition right now, as obvious as it is. Elon Musk, another giant of the tech world, and as I said, the richest single individual in the world, as astonishing as that is, he wants everyone to understand this is not going to end well, this censorship move. Here's his tweet about this. Speaking of Twitter, a lot of people are going to be super unhappy with West Coast high tech as the de facto arbiter of free speech. This is more true than a lot of people even realize. That you can see there, that tweet got, almost 77,000 likes and certainly a lot of play online. But remember, my friends, Silicon Valley, particularly these companies like Twitter and Facebook and Google, are full of very wealthy but very dedicated social justice warriors. They believe in this stuff. They are evangelists for the left, and they are looking to use the influence, the money, the power that they have to advance left-wing causes, and yes, with it, the Democrat Party. Make no mistake about it, they are more left-wing than your run-of-the-mill Democrat. That's what you're getting with the Silicon Valley giants, so be very aware of that. Look, the country's going through a terrible time with COVID. We still have far too many infections, and far too many people, sadly, tragically, are dying day in and day out, and this shouldn't be a partisan issue. You've heard that a lot, but it really shouldn't be. This is about what makes us most likely to withstand this with the fewest possible lost lives. But there are some people who make this very political right away, and I think we should at least take a look at what their allegations are and be honest about it. Representative JAYAPAL has blamed the GOP for giving her COVID. She says, I just received a positive COVID-19 test result after being locked down in a secured room at the Capitol, where several Republicans not only cruelly refused to wear a mask, but recklessly mocked colleagues and staff who offered them one. So the idea, let's be very clear, the idea here is that because there were some Republicans who weren't wearing a mask for a period of time, she doesn't even know if they had COVID or if they have COVID today. No idea. But she just assumes that that's how she got COVID. And she was wearing a mask, but they weren't wearing a mask. What's interesting is, well, we have some video of this to share from inside the Capitol. Play it.
There you can see members of Congress. That's Pramila Jayapal.
Pramila Jayapal from Washington, correct.
There were a lot of prayers said today, not only on Capitol Hill, but across America for the state of our...
And that...
Everybody stay down, shouts a member of Congress.
Now, that is a terrifying moment, of course. That is when the Capitol was in the process of the lockdown. But since we're also now being told that there are COVID concerns coming directly from the sheltering in place, Representative Jayapal is in that video not wearing a mask herself. So it seems like we need to have, this is about COVID, by the way. I'm not talking about the attack on the Capitol right now, but it seems like we should have a uniform standard for this. If we're going to complain about certain people not wearing masks, and in the same day, in the same building, those people or that individual is not wearing a mask, what's the mask shaming about? It doesn't really seem to make sense, does it? We should at least be able to ask the question, shouldn't we? And then there's the left trying to take all of this to the maximum. And I know this is what we're in for, not just until Biden takes the presidency, but even beyond that. You have Ilhan Omar, who is making it very clear what she thinks of the president. She says he's a murderer. Play it.
I know that some have likened the reaction that we are getting, obviously, from the president and some of Democrats and some of Republicans in Congress to someone saying, if we were to hold a murderer or someone who's committed violence.
So referring to murderers and Trump, I mean, not really as explicitly calling him a murderer there as she could have, to be fair and to be clear. But this is the kind of stuff you're going to talk about, that Trump has to be held accountable as though he were the one who went into the Capitol. I mean, as though he were the one that actually actively broke the law or told others to do that. Look at the transcript. I keep saying this. Look at the transcript of what he said. There is definitely political accountability for the president when it comes to this. But to say that there is criminal liability is something that a lot of people are saying is a stretch, goes too far. And then, so she compared it, to be clear, Ilhan Omar compared it to, it's like holding a murderer accountable, but she did not actually call him a murderer. Project Veritas, once again, well, I'll let Project Veritas speak for itself. Play it.
Then when Biden wins, we'll go through all the Republican voters and Homeland Security will take the children away. How about that? And we'll put them into re-education camps.
Amen.
In these times, which are unique, Trump is close to him.
What are we going to do if we don't like it?
Go to the White House and throw Molotov cocktails.
Yeah. Chief counsel, top lawyer at PBS, public broadcasting service, funded in part by your tax dollars. Yeah, you heard it there. But remember, they certainly call out, and we do too, any political violence on the right. I wish they would just call out this kind of rhetoric on the left and also these actions on the left, as we saw with BLM and Antifa. But conversation we'll continue to have here. That's it for Hold the Line. The No Spin News with Bill O'Reilly is up next. Shields high.